Good afternoon, everyone. The February 15th, 2024 regular council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. We have one late item this afternoon, the letter of support request from the Ucluelet Racket Sports Club. Has everyone received the late item? May I have a motion to amend the agenda by adding the letter of support request from Ucluelet Racket Sport Club as correspondence item 10.2 and renumbering the remaining correspondence items?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson.
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare. All in favour? None opposed. That carries. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Mafty.
Second.
Oh, look
Ooh, tie. Councillor Kennington.
Oh, God.
All in favour? None opposed? That carries. There are 4 sets of minutes on the agenda for adoption this afternoon. Someone has been busy. The first set of minutes is from the January 8th, 2024 special council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare.
Second.
Councillor Kennington. All in favour? None opposed. That carries. The next minutes are from the January 9th, 2024 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare.
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson. All in favour? None opposed. That carries. The third minutes are from the January 23rd, 2024 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington, Councillor Mafty, all in favour? None opposed. That carries. And the final minutes for review are from the October 19th, 2023 regular Harbour Authority meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
Second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favour? None opposed. That carries. We have one delegation this afternoon from Harbour Air. Please try and limit your presentation to 10 minutes, and the floor is yours. Welcome. Make sure the mic's on.
I guess turn it on. Did we? Oh, I got it.
There.
You can hear me? All
That's
right.
perfect. Thank you.
Oh, no. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jessica Dunn, and I represent Harbour Air. I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional territory of the Ucluelet people. We want to say thank you for allowing us to live and work on your lands. Oh, I think I went the wrong. Pardon me. So what we are going here, we'd like to talk about a little bit about Harbour Air today. Harbour Air's potential schedule to start service here in Ucluelet, and our operations and benefits to the community. Harbour Air is the largest seaplane operator in the Americas. A huge part of our success is due to the beauty of the West Coast experience, which is why we are strongly committed to being an industry leader on sustainable initiatives and mitigating our climate impact. We operate over 280 flights per day. We have 400,000 passengers per year. We have over 45 aircrafts with over 12 destinations. and 470 employees. We're the first airline in the world to fly an electric plane, and we are known for our on-time performance. We're also positioned to be the first Canadian airline to utilize GPS IFR, flying directly to the water runways, which will also support us to be a more reliable airline. Harbour Air proposed schedule to Euclid in the summer of 2024 would be a triangle schedule with 2 flights a day that will connect Vancouver and Tofino with nonstop service. What we would do is look at our proposed time would leave Vancouver approximately 11:30 in the morning, and it would arrive to Tofino at 12:20 and move to Euclid by 12:30. So that would connect, and we would do that twice a day for Euclid and Vancouver direct, with that connection of Tofino to Euclid as well. So we are still right now confirming a storefront location, those options for check-in and ticketing services, but are in connecting with local shops close to the docks where we could find a reasonable partnership to work on our service there. This schedule would allow us for quick day trips from Tofino to Euclid to bring in those day time travelers to explore what Euclid has to offer. And our options here would be seasonal from June to October. I keep going backwards, I apologize. For flight operations, the NAV Canada Water Aerodrome Supplement designates the northwest end of the harbor as the preferred takeoff and landing area that's strategically situated away from the bulk of vessel traffic and developed zones. 2 noise abatement procedures that we could instate are takeoffs that stay over the water until at least 1,000 feet before turning on course. Arrival or departure paths do not overfly land between the ancient cedars and the Amphitrite Point. And our aircraft also have 3-blade propellers, which produce a lower noise signature compared to 2-blade propellers used by some of the commercial operators. Benefits to the community. Rescue flights during emergencies and road closures. This could be an opportunity for during the road closures to provide that viable infrastructure to the community. Harbour Air will also provide an additional way for visitors into Tofino, the opportunity to explore Euclid in a unique 10-minute seaplane experience. Harbour Air is looking forward to partnering with local businesses and associations to find the best ways to promote Euclid as an attractive destination. Seasonal direct nonstop flights to Vancouver provide the ability to easily and safely connect to communities within an hour for Euclid residents and visitors, especially to medical appointments, business meetings, leisure travel, or to connect to other destinations. We're offering visitors an opportunity to fly directly to Euclid and reduce travel time and spend more time in this beautiful place. And Harbour Air is investing in critical infrastructure to the community to support Euclid as a destination that in turn will elevate economic value to the businesses within the community. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just going to see if Council has any questions for you. Councillor Mafty?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'm just wondering if there's any what the next steps for you are. Is there any community Is there any community consultation scheduled? Is there any input that is going to be considered? Who's in charge of how this is going to progress, and what's the next step for you guys?
Well, to my understanding, we would love to have a thumbs up from from yourself, from Mayor McEwen and councillors, that this would be a good service to bring into the community. Ultimately, we would partnership with any people that we are would like, that is necessary for this to work out. Ultimately, you know, we want this to be very successful. We think this is a win-win for both ourselves and the community. We had this really great opportunity to support your local neighbor Tofino this year. When emergencies were happening, road closures were happening, we were, because of the agreement of working in that community already, we're able to do rescue flights, bring emergency products that were required and supplies. And so I believe, based on some of the information that I have been provided through community members, that would be a really good opportunity for us to support Euclid as well.
If I could just follow up on that question, I believe Ms. Fortune suggested that you contact the Ucluelethat Nation to get their input, because they're our neighbors right across the bay.
Yes, we that has not happened at this point. I had talked to Ms. Fortune before to get an introduction and ask for an introduction. We're happy to have that conversation. We do acknowledge and respectfully want to work in the community the best we can.
Councillor Anderson?
Through the mayor, is there any further infrastructure that you would need, like for tying up the boats, or would you be using the government dock, or did you have a plan for anything added that you might need from us?
Based on the initial inspection that our VP of Operations did in November, there really is not a lot of work that would be required for the dock. There may be a few extra add-ons for tying up the dock that's required, but it's very, very minimal. Maybe, I believe, a little bit of paint, I think, was discussed with Kevin over there, but other than that, would be very minimal and able to do right away.
Oh, thank you.
And we are talking about Whiskey Dock is where they would tie up, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Councillor Hoare? Nothing?
I just, I'm not trying to reiterate my question, but I just wanted to get a clear understanding of whether or not there will be an opportunity for public input before your plans progress. Is it like, I'm just trying to understand if this is a delegation to inform us that this is something that you're pursuing, or if this is to inform us that this is something you'd like to consider, and there's like a timeline to move forward with next steps. Like what's the progression here is what I'm trying to understand.
I was advised that we needed to come before council to bring this opportunity to talk about bringing the service. Ultimately, if the decision is granted by mayor and council today, then our next steps would be to provide, find out where we could set up shop, figure out operationally with Ms. Fortune and team with regards to a Transport Canada checklist that would need to be put into place to check the docks. We ultimately, if it's required that we need to get public input, maybe that is something that we can move forward with and figure out if that means we need to do a public hearing. Again, we're here to support any actions that you request us to do to make this work.
Thank you.
Could you, you've been flying into Tofino for quite a long time, correct?
We have, that is correct.
And so could you describe the process of how that was initiated? Was there public input at that point?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Tom to step here. He is operations, so he will be able to provide that input better than I can.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. You hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so with the Tofino process, we were working with Tofino Resort and Marina And so they actually approached us with the idea, and so from an operations standpoint, that was kind of solidified that was the location we were going to start with, and then at that point they had kind of done a lot of the community involvement and community outreach, and then Transport Canada inspection, which is a one-day kind of process. Transport Canada would send a delegate out, just more looking at like the safety features and things like that, and then once we get the stamp of approval from Transport Canada, which they did in Tofino, it's added onto our air operator certificate, and then it's a scheduled point of service. And so when you get a community or a destination added as a scheduled point of service, you can operate, cease operations, start operating again, things like that. So, that's something that we could do for here, at any point. And then if the community deems that no, this isn't something they want, we have that on record for, down the road. Okay.
And how long have you been flying into Tofino?
Since 2018.
2018.
Yeah. So varying times throughout the year, anywhere from 1 to 4 flights this year, combining with the triangle flights that we're going to do, it'll be about 6 flights a day into Tofino.
And
Well-
Councillor Mafty?
I just noting that one of the immediate differences between what you're proposing in Ucluelet and what you've been doing in Tofino is that in Tofino you operate from Tofino Resort and Marina, which is a privately owned dock that's the property of a business. But what I understand is that the facility you want to use in Ucluelet is the Whiskey Dock, which is a federally owned dock that's managed by the Harbor Authority. It's managed by the Harbor Authority of the district. Okay, so it's not a federal asset, but it's a public facility, not a private one. So does that factor into how you're hoping to arrange?
Yeah, so we would have to discuss with the community what that arrangement's going to be. Different locations. One that comes to mind is Powell River. We do our check-in at a private business, and then we use the Powell River floatplane dock to do our operations. So again, there's compensation there and all that kind of stuff that can be worked out.
I think it's early days and a lot of details have not been figured out quite yet. But it was great to have you come in and introduce yourselves and tell us about this exciting prospect. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You don't have to stay for the meeting if you don't want to. We will now conduct 2 individual public hearings. During these hearings, Council will receive public input on District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw numbers 1335-2023 and 1336-2024. Council will also receive public input on Development Variance Permit DVP 23-12 during the public hearing on Bylaw number 1335-2023. As provided for in the Local Government Act, Council is required to hold a public hearing before adopting a zoning bylaw, an official community plan bylaw, or amendments thereto, unless a public hearing is prohibited by the Local Government Act or waived by Council in accordance with that Act. This evening there will be 2 hearings. At the conclusion of each, the hearing will be closed. Once the public hearing is closed, Council cannot accept further communications or presentations from the applicant or public respecting the proposed bylaw unless Council decides to hold an additional public hearing. Please note there will be no decisions made during these hearings, and Council is under no obligation to enter into debate on any issue. The purpose is to hear from the public before 3rd reading of each bylaw. Council may consider amending the proposed bylaws based on the public input received at the public hearings. At a public hearing, all persons who deem their interest in property affected by the proposed bylaw will be given an opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions on matters contained in the bylaw. However, all who speak must restrict their comments to the subject bylaw, and it is my responsibility to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. You will have 5 minutes to address Council for the first time. The clerk will advise you at the 4-minute mark and when your time is up. After everyone has spoken once, those wishing to speak again will have an opportunity. After hearing submissions from members of the public, council may ask questions to clarify what has been said. However, this is not a Q&A session or a town hall meeting. To maintain an atmosphere that is respectful of all points of view, it is important for the audience to refrain from applauding or cheering for speakers. Our audience. Today, applicants and members of the public can participate in person or electronically. All speakers must state their name and address. Over to you, Mr. Rotenberg.
Through the mayor. The subject zoning amendment bylaws and development variance permit, as well as related materials, the District of Ucluelet zoning bylaw and the District of Ucluelet official community plan are available for review over with the Director of Community Planning in the back. The public may, the same is also available on our website, ucluelet.ca. The public may participate in this hearing in person, by phone, or by Zoom, or by email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca. To speak in person, raise your hand when the mayor calls for in-person speakers. The mayor will call on you when it's your turn. Please speak from the mic at the podium when it's your turn, as this meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and on YouTube. To speak by Zoom, click the raise your hand icon when the mayor calls for speakers via Zoom. When it's your turn, you will be called on by your Zoom name, so please ensure that your first and last name are your Zoom name. To speak by phone, press *9 when the mayor calls for speakers calling in. When it's your turn, you will be called on by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Press *6 to unmute yourself. Any unpublished emails about the bylaw or development variance permit received at communityinput@ucluelet.ca before the end of the public hearing will be read into the record. Please put the bylaw or variance number in the subject line and keep your emails short. For further details about how to participate by Zoom, telephone, or email, please visit ucluelet.ca.
We will now move on to item 6.1, which is our first public hearing. I now declare the public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1335/2023 open. This public hearing is also an opportunity for the public to provide input on Development Variance Permit DVP 23-12. This zoning amendment bylaw and development variance permit relate to the property at 256 Matterson Drive. The Director of Community Planning will now provide a brief overview of the proposed bylaw and development variance permit. After the Director speaks, the applicant will have an opportunity to speak, and then I will call for public input. Welcome, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. And through the mayor, in general terms, the purpose of District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1335/2023 is to amend the District of Ucluelet Zoning Bylaw number 1160/2013 to change the zoning designation of the westernmost 9.59 meters wide portion of the property at 256 Matterson Drive from R1 single-family residential to R6 infill single-family residential, or R6, to facilitate a subdivision that would change the boundary between 2 existing parcels and to allow a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit as accessory uses within the new R6 zoned area. And as the mayor mentioned, there's also a development variance permit, which this is an opportunity for the public to be heard on that variance. And so, again, in general terms, the development variance permit, DVP 23-12, would permit a minimum lot frontage of 9.59 meters, whereas section R-6.2.4 of the Ucluelet zoning bylaw number 1160/2013 requires a minimum frontage of 10 meters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Does council have any questions for staff?
Just a quick one.
Councillor Hoare?
I think I'm correct in this. This is site specific. The variances and to the R6 zoning are only for this lot. Any other R6 would not have that addition.
Through the mayor, to clarify, yes, this is a change of the zoning on this parcel. The change of the uses would allow it on this parcel. And the variance is specific to the property. It's issued for the property.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. This is an opportunity for the applicant to present. Do we know if the applicant is online?
Yes, the applicant has his hand raised right now. I'm going to unmute you now. You are now unmuted on our end.
Welcome, Mr. Giordano. Did you wish to speak?
Mr. Giordano will just have to unmute yourself now. You are unmuted on our end. Oh, I'll try again. Okay, I'm just going to promote him to panelist and see if that helps. Here we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that. I had a connection issue. Thank you, Mayor, Council, District staff. I want to thank you for your diligent efforts, dedication, and empathy throughout this rezoning and subdivision process. It's been a real amazing opportunity for me to learn a lot. So I extend my gratitude to the neighbors and community members present today for taking the time to participate in this hearing. As mentioned by Mr. Gregg, the purpose of this application is to adjust that shared property line between our two existing properties to establish the infill RS6 building lot. Our goal is to facilitate the creation of an additional home within our community, which is in need of more housing options. I deeply value the input of our neighbors and the wider public, and certainly welcome any comments and feedback on this proposal. Thank you very much for considering this application and your commitment to enhancing our community. That's the only statement I'd like to make. I did have one quick question about the proposed amendment to the bylaw. If that's an appropriate time for me to ask now.
I believe you can. It would probably be staff that would have the answer, but go ahead.
Right. There's talk, so just to read this as it was read already, in general terms, the purpose of this bylaw is to amend the District of Euclid zoning bylaw 1160/2013 to change the zoning designation of the westernmost point, 9.59 meters wide portion of 256 Madison Drive from R1 single family to R6 infill single family residential R6 to facilitate changing the boundary between the two existing parcels and to allow for a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit as necessary uses within the new R6 area. This to me sounds like we would have the capacity to build a home and potentially either put a secondary suite in that home or an accessory dwelling. Am I correct?
We'll get Mr. Gregg to answer that for you. Hold on.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, yes. The on page 29 of the public hearing agenda, on the council agenda, that is a copy of the bylaw, and essentially, yes, that captures it. That parcel on the new proposed parcel, that portion that's being zoned for R6 would also have this little site-specific clause that's being added to the zoning bylaw that says on that westernmost 9.59 meters of lot 10, which is 256 Madison Drive, the following regulations apply. And it says that the following additional secondary uses are permitted, and it lists secondary suite or accessory residential dwelling unit.
Does that answer your
Thank you.
question?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for everybody there. Thank you. That is all I have, and I appreciate you.
All right, I'll just see if the council has any questions for you. If you can hold on for a moment. Is he still there, Mr. Rotenberg?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have a question for Mr. Giordano, but I just wanted to clarify with Bruce that it's an or. It's not an and or. It's one or the other, but not both.
It does say or.
Yeah, it does, but it seems like Mr. Giordano was also confused, and I just thought this would be useful for my own sake to.
It says the following additional residential or secondary uses are permitted: secondary suite or accessory residential dwelling unit.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's one or the other.
Yeah.
Okay,
Clear.
great.
Thank you.
To that point, just to confirm that I understand, and maybe I sound confused. In simple terms, I can build a new home, or somebody who decides to build a home with a suite in that home, or that single family dwelling has an additional building, an accessory building, which is used for the purpose of secondary accommodations.
Yes, Mr. Gregg
Thank
is
you.
nodding his head yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Does any other councillors have questions for Mr. Giordano? No? Okay, well, thank you for taking the time to be on Zoom for us.
Greatly appreciate your time.
We are now moving on to the public input section of this public hearing. This is the first call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to address this bylaw or the development variance permit? Please raise your hand. I'll call on you when it's your turn. Are there any members of the public attending by Zoom that wish to speak? Click the raise your hand icon.
We do not have any hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Are there any speakers calling in? Press *9 if you wish to speak.
We do not have any hands raised at this time.
And have we received any unpublished emails about the bylaw to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Just updating my folder. Not at this point in time.
Okay, second call for speakers. Any members of the public attending in person? Are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
Are there any speakers calling in?
No hands raised at this time.
And any additional emails?
Updating my email. None at this time.
And third call for speakers. Any members of the public attending in person that wish to speak? Any speakers on Zoom with their hands raised?
No hands raised at this time.
Any speakers calling in?
No hands raised at this time.
And any emails to community input?
No emails at this time.
All right, I now declare public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1335/2023 and the public input opportunity for Development Variance Permit DVP 23-12 closed at 4:34 p.m. We will now move on to our second public hearing. I now declare the public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1336/2024 open. This zoning amendment bylaw would rezone a proposed lot currently in Tugwell Field Park off of Forbes Road. The district is currently seeking elector approval required to close this section of Tugwell Field Park through an alternative approval process on District of Ucluelet Parkland Disposal Bylaw number 1334/2024. This bylaw authorizes the closing of a 0.201 hectare portion of Tugwell Field Park and transferring the closed park lot to the food bank on the edge for $1. The alternative approval process for this bylaw closes on March 13th, 2024 at 4 o'clock. Additional information about the Parkland Disposal Bylaw and the alternative approval process is available at the District Office at 200 Main Street during regular business hours and online at ucluelet.ca/AAP. The Director of Planning, Mr. Gregg, will now provide a brief overview of the bylaw. After Mr. Gregg presents, I will call for public input. Welcome back.
Thank you. Through the mayor. In general terms, the purpose of this District of Ucluelet zoning amendment bylaw number 1336, 2024 is to amend the District of Ucluelet zoning bylaw number 1160, 2013 to change the zoning designation of a proposed new lot located on the north section of Tugwell Fields fronting Forbes Road from the CD 1.14 Park subzone designation within the CD1 Eco-Industrial Park Zone to the P1 Public Institutional designation with food bank to be a permitted principal use on the subject property. The amendment bylaw would also add a new definition of food bank into the zoning bylaw as follows. And they would say that food bank, it would be defined as the use of buildings or lands for a nonprofit organization that operates with the exclusive intent of feeding the hungry. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Mr. Gregg? This is now an opportunity to provide input on District of Ucluelet zoning amendment bylaw number 1336, 2024. This is not an opportunity to comment on the District of Ucluelet Parkland Disposal Bylaw number 1334, 2024, which, if adopted, would authorize closing a .201 hectare portion of Tugwell Field Park. Members of the public that are interested in the Parkland Disposal Bylaw and related alternative process can visit the district office or ucluelet.ca/AAP for additional information. This is the first call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak about District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1336, 2024? Are there any members of the public attending on Zoom that wish to speak? Click the raise your hand icon.
No hands are currently raised.
And are any speakers calling in? Press *9 if you wish to speak.
No hands are currently raised.
And have we received any unpublished emails about the bylaw to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Updating my inbox. No emails at this time.
Okay, second call for speakers. Any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak? Are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
Are there any speakers calling in?
No hands raised at this time.
Have we received any additional emails?
No emails.
Okay, third and final call for speakers. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak? Are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
Are there any speakers calling in?
No hands raised at this time.
And have we received any emails on at communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
None on this bylaw.
Thank you. I now declare public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1336, 2024 closed at 4:39 p.m. We're now moving on to item 7, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? All right. We are now moving on to the report items. There are 6 report items this evening. The first item is 8.1 Fire and Emergency Services 2023 Annual Report. This will be presented by the Fire Chief, Mr. Geddes.
Good afternoon, through the mayor. It's my pleasure to present you the 2023 annual report on behalf of the fire department and emergency services. Just wait for Mr. Rotenberg. There we go. You can advance there, Joe, please. Yeah. Go ahead, yeah, please. Go. So just a reminder, a couple of years ago, we did an exercise to come up with a mission and some core values of the fire department, and we refer to these quite often. They're posted all over the fire hall, and as we bring on new members as well. And it's important that to make a cohesive unit that we do all live by these values. So our common mission is to make a positive impact in the lives of those we serve, and that's just sort of a very generalized statement. At the end of the day, hopefully we made a positive impact with what we did. We can't save them all, but if we made a positive impact, then we've met our mission for the day. Core values of safety, reliability, compassion, respect, competence, and resilience. Next slide, please. And there's just an example of a quick little show and tell we did at the school one day with the police and the ambulance, and kids just bombarded all the equipment out there. It was great. So one of the meat and potatoes of the report here is this. So we'll start with the call volume, and you can see there's a gradual increase in the last 5 years. We don't have great records prior to 2019, and that's why I only went back that far. 2020, you'll see quite a dip in overall call volume. That was instituted by the provincial government when COVID first hit us hard, and they mandated that first responders don't respond to any calls. So all fire departments across the province saw a significant decrease in medical calls in 2020. So it's sort of an anomaly, and that's why there's a bit of a dip in 2020. That aside, you can see there's sort of a steady increase in call volume, not to the point where I'm concerned. It's fairly normal increase in overall volume. We still continue to do approximately 40% of our calls as medical calls, which is sort of a normal average number. So I'm not concerned with that one bit. Next slide, please. And then there's a breakdown of individual call types. So starting at the top, 26 alarm calls, 6 calls for assisting BC EHS, 5 for beach brush fires, 8 for burning complaints, 2 chimney fires, 10 duty officer calls, and that could be anything, just a question from fire dispatch about jurisdiction, about a call coming in. It can be sometimes also a burning complaint. It can sometimes come in as a duty officer call. And the medical aid calls 66, hydro trouble 10. A good chunk of those hydro trouble calls were one particular night when we had that significant snow event last February. Marine incidents 2, motor vehicle incidents 36. And as I reported last time I presented to council, that's down significantly, most likely due to the Highway 4 closure. We had a period last summer where we didn't attend any motor vehicle incidents on Highway 4 for about a month, which is rare for that time of year. So, gas propane leak 6, and other is 2, and then structure fires we had 5. Next slide, please. So in total, we responded to 43 calls outside the municipality. So that includes our MVIs and our mutual aid calls with Tofino and our partner agencies, TOQUAT and Pacific Rim National Park. We did have 2 structure fires in Ucluelet. Both resulted in minimal property damage. And a structure fire, again, just to inform council, doesn't necessarily mean that the whole building is fully involved. It just means that a structure is on fire, whether it's on fire and already out or fully ablaze. It still comes in as a structure fire. So the 2 we had in town were not of major significance. And there's just a map showing our coverage area, and that's our road rescue area, which you can see goes basically out to Virgin Falls. And then towards Port Alberni, our cutoff is about the zip line. And then everywhere in between that we can access for rescue calls only. Fire protection is strictly within the municipality and in the contracted areas. Next slide, please. And just a little bit about the road rescue calls. So we do get reimbursed from EMCR, Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, for those calls. And those funds are allocated to Fire Facilities, Vehicles, and Equipment Reserve Fund account. There's one of the calls we attended last year. We've attended a few calls on that particular corner. This was a particularly significant incident where a trailer flipped over and there's a machine that ended up taking out that pole and sliding down the river. Next, please, Joey. And there's the result of that. So, Madam Mayor, I believe you're familiar with that day because a bunch of you were trying to get out of town. Yeah. Next slide, please. Service agreements. So we continue to service our neighboring local governments through service agreements with Ucluelet First Nation, the ACRD, And we have 2 of the ACRD, so one for South Long Beach Area C and one specifically for the airport, Toquat Nation, and the District of Tofino, and Parks Canada. We continue updating these agreements to ensure the district is compensated fairly and that we're providing services. They're getting quality for the money. So that's ongoing. Is working on updating all these agreements. And special to the agreements with Toquat and Ucluelet First Nations involves a little bit of consultation and a little bit more support to help their community specifically. So here's a day a couple months ago where Deputy Chief McCurry and I attended at Toquat at their brand new beautiful community building that they have out there. They were asking about a little bit of information on fire extinguishers and smoke detectors. So we went out there and spent an afternoon informing some of the residents. So. And then there's Deputy Chief McCurry showing one of the elders how to actually operate a fire extinguisher. So, of course, a good part of what we do is training. That's the biggest part of what we do is preparing. Throughout the year, we dedicated 2,188 person hours to training. So that's equivalent to a little over 91 days. So the gang continues to do really well in the training department. They're really buying into the program. A little bit of a breakdown on that. So we had 6 members who completed first responder training. That was something we were able to do in-house. I'm the certified instructor evaluator for that, although we bring in an evaluator from outside when teaching that. 1 member completed fire officer level 1. 3 members completed air brakes and driver training. 3 members completed live fire 1 certification COMOX. 2 completed Incident Command System level 200. Incident Command System, there's 4 levels, so 200 obviously being the second level. 1 completed Incident Command level 300. And 3 of our members completed certification at the exterior firefighter level. So that's the first significant hurdle on the way to full certification to being a fully trained firefighter. So. In emergency management world, we hosted a joint training scenario that included activations of the EOCs for the District of Ucluelet, Tofino, and the ACRD, and over 60 people took part in that day. And it was a joint exercise through a grant application that we combined funds with the ACRD and Tofino, and it was a day well spent, and it was really nice to see it all set up right here. We had 3 separate EOC activations, and so any communications throughout the exercise we had to do as we would a normal exercise through radio, through phone. But at the end of the day, it was nice to actually have a face-to-face wrap up with everybody in the same room. So, next picture, Joe. There's a picture of the setup of our EOC for that day, which seemed to function fairly well. Okay. There's a picture of our great, amazing finance team that day. And then just one of a group shot of one of the briefing meetings during that exercise. We held 3 joint training sessions with Tofino Fire Rescue. There's one, again, with our relationship that we have with the airport is great because they have this great pond in the middle of the airport for float planes, but it also is a great facility for us to train where we can practice drafting water. We don't have a lot of areas here where we can actually draft out of a static water source. Even though we have the ocean, we can't get close enough to draw out of it. So this is a great opportunity to practice that skill drafting. But then also just recirculating the water right back into the pool. So it's a perfect place for this. So we tend to meet Tofino out there quite a bit for orientation on the airport as they expand and familiarization with their equipment. And that's actually 2 of our members working on their trucks. So. We've got a partnership with Parks Canada. So that's a verbal sort of handshake agreement at this point that we're working into the agreement as we update that one. Go ahead, Joe. And part of that is they provide us with a minimal amount of wildfire equipment and also will give us a refresher every spring for our members. And this is firefighter Terry making short work of a fire at the airport as well on that day. So continuous ongoing training is our weekly Tuesday evening training sessions. NFPA 1001 written and practical evaluation. So that's the firefighter certifications that, again, we do most of that in-house. As an evaluator, I do that on behalf of NFPA. We do our apparatus driver operator training. Fire officer development is ongoing. Most of that is done after hours on the member's own time, whether that's out of town or through correspondence. And then live fire level 1 and 2 certification at Comox Fire Training Center. and survival training and rescue techniques, which is a self-rescue course specific to Comox. There's a million courses similar to this one out there, but Comox is really refined it and dialed it in. They just have some really great leading edge ideas on firefighter self-rescue. So our members all go through that training at some point in Comox as well. In 2021, BC Ministry of Health announced a new legislature that saw an expanded scope of practice for all licenses of under the EMA licensing board, including first responders. So some of the new skills that our members are going to be able to be licensed for include antiplatelet therapy, so ASA administration, which can be critical when somebody's having a cardiac event, blood glucose assessment and management, blood pressure assessment, intramuscular injection of epinephrine in anaphylaxis patients, use and interpretation of pulse oximetry and carbon monoxide oximetry, and nasopharyngeal airway management. So we're going to be working on doing all those upgrades or licenses again in-house throughout 2024 as time permits. So those are all things I'm certified to instruct as well, so that'll make it easy. And just some happy pictures of the gang. That's Lieutenant Dandran working on our rescue, working with our rescue winch. There's a scenario that we do, we try and do twice a year down at the Small Craft Harbor, is charge the standpipes down there and test the system. And we've had to use that system, as we all know, a few times in my time here. So it's nice to know that it's reliable and works, and that our members are competent and current with what it takes to utilize that system. And there's a gang just getting a ladder lesson. And a lot of what we do is site familiarity. So this is one night last winter where we went down to the Columbia Fuels dock just as a walkthrough. While we do inspect these types of businesses, not all the members get the opportunity to walk through and see all the systems in place, such as the spill catchment and the fire suppression capabilities of some of these businesses. So it's a great opportunity for our members to get to know these businesses, the limitations and the hazards involved. And again, just working on our road rescue skills, that's between that and medical calls is a big part of what we do. So this is actually one of our smaller members wielding that sword like it's nothing. Those tools are quite heavy. So a lot of it is ergonomics and technique. And then this was one of the marine fires that we had last winter there that they always happen on particularly stormy nights. This one, no exception. And this one really, just when we thought we had a good handle on it as a vessel, was actually sinking because it was tough to put out. Then the fuel on top of the water actually caught fire, and that's what you're seeing here. And then the wind picked up, and then the wind blew it into the dock and created got us a little worried. But the team did a great job. Once it got to this point, I had a couple of my firefighters that had just come back from live fire training and just attacked it and knocked it down. So it was really nice to see their training kick in that night. Fire prevention world. So we completed 48 fire safety inspections. Focus of the inspection program, again, has still mainly been on business license applications, and which the majority of are short-term rentals. So we're focusing on that, although we're working on the big picture as well. So we've also initiated a formal pre-fire planning program, and that's a program that we have in all of our apparatus that'll show up. So if there is an event, say at the co-op, we know exactly where the fire department connections are, where are the hazards, the propane tanks, the fuel tanks, what other hazards are there, where fire extinguishers are located, where we can go, where we can't go. So that's all spelled out on a software program for us. So we're busy inputting data into that. As we do an inspection, we also do a pre-plan now on the facility. And we continue to work closely with the planning department by reviewing occupancy and development permits. Bruce and I talk quite regularly, it seems, these days. And of course, 2023 saw the hiring of full-time deputy chief. You can see the weight off my shoulders a little bit. We're getting there. We picked a great guy. I'm quite sure of that. So Deputy Chief McCurry, he's focusing on fire prevention and firefighter training. At the end of the year, we had 16 members total. which is on the lower side. So that's why we did a recruitment campaign. But I can see out of that 16, the engagement level was amazingly high, which was great. They were really buying into the training program, and we're getting really great attendance at calls. So while that number is low, the engagement level is high, but not enough where I was comfortable. So we held a pretty aggressive recruiting campaign, interviewed 9 candidates throughout late fall, and then I'm happy to say 5 new recruits started last week, actually. So our recruit class from 2023 actually finished their probation a little bit early. They really did amazingly well, and they continue to do amazingly well. 3 of them are away next week for a training course together as well. So, and then they were assigned to their duty crews. And you can see this was actually the night where I gave them their uniforms, and they just look at the smiles on their face. It's great. And these 3 continue to lead by example. There are 3 of our newer firefighters. So we've got firefighter Terry on the left, firefighter Kenyon in the middle, and then firefighter Jackson on the right. During Tsunami Preparedness Week, we hosted a high ground hike for the first time in several years, mainly due to COVID. And that's a community evacuation drill. It's designed to raise the awareness and risk of tsunamis. And a couple days before, I got a call from Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, Honorable Bowen Ma, wanting to attend our event. And she didn't want a lot of fanfare, so we didn't advertise. But so she came to our little event here, and we gave her a little tour of the town, and I showed her what we're doing as far as emergency management. And she also attended in Tofino up the road as well. There's a picture of we had a little bit of a fair. We had the Red Cross here involved as well. We had a group from University of Ottawa. We had the BC Earthquake Alliance as well. So there was a little bit of a fair that we had here in the UCC to go along with the day. And there's Mr. Ma there with the Red Cross representative. So in May, the Firefighters Association held a very successful community barbecue at Big Beach. And proceeds from that were allocated to the Firefighters Benevolent Fund, and that's a fund that the Firefighters Association developed anytime that a firefighter or a retired firefighter comes into some issues, whether it's health or any types of issues where they could use some money, and it's distributed on a vote by the association, and we had to replenish that fund because we used it last year. So we had a barbecue down at Big Beach one night, and it went over really well. And we had one local corporate sponsor actually that wrote a significant check to the association that night as well. Deputy Chief Fortune and I had we attended the Fire Chiefs Association of BC conference last year in Penticton, and we had the honor of recognizing former Fire Chief Eve Tink. Go ahead, Joe. So anytime a retired or a former fire chief passes away, you have the opportunity to honor them in front of your peers and their peers, in front of a room full of fire chiefs and government officials. So I'm obviously the one with the shiniest head in that picture, but DC beside me there, and they had a nice picture of Chief Ted there on the wall, and we said some nice words about him. In July, the team participated in Yuki Days. We had an impromptu dance team breakout during the parade. The Jokers and the rescue truck discovered the loudspeaker and started playing music, and it turned into quite an event. So it sounds like the dance team might be expanding for this year. We'll have to wait and see. And flipping burgers at Yuki Days, I'm not sure how the RCMP member got in there, but no, we love that guy. He's great. He was a big help that day at the community barbecue. So. We also helped out the Pack Barbecue, welcome the kids back to school in September. That's always a good time for us and a good time for the kids as well to see the firefighters and the equipment. We had an open house during Fire Prevention Week in October. And just some pictures of that. And it was really neat to see the kids all dressed up. There was a lot of young firefighters there that day. And we handed out a lot of information, gave out a lot of information to adults as well on Fire Smart and fire prevention in general. And we also used it as an opportunity for recruiting as well. The team did a great auto extrication demo that you can see was really well attended outside there. Because there was quite an art to actually getting somebody out of the car safely, knowing the hazards of each individual car, and it has to be done methodically, quickly, but safely. Number one, is the top priority. Okay. And there's a couple little junior firefighters that this one young fellow just was fascinated with the extinguisher. So there's our ESS team, and that's a team that really often goes unnoticed because they don't get a lot of publicity, but that's under my purview as well. So we have Jerry on the left and Tony on the right, and Christine Bryce is the other member of our emergency support services team. And they're a group we can call out anytime somebody's displaced. We had to call them out before when we had a fire in town here, and 3 families actually were displaced, and they're the ones connected with EMCR and the Red Cross and the local businesses that put people up and support them for up to 3 days. So nice to see the guys out that day at the open house. And then one of the last big events of the year is the team even had to make sure that we got Santa to breakfast at the UCC for all the kids. So there's Deputy Chief making sure Santa gets in and out safely. The reflective address sign is ongoing, which is great. There's about 100 signs scattered all over town now with a goal to keep going. Go ahead, Joe. We're getting more and more businesses involved with these signs now, and while I understand aesthetically they're not the most amazing, but we don't need pretty when we're trying to find them. We need reflective. We need them to stick out, and they do. So it's really nice to see some of the local businesses here getting on board with those signs. We purchased a previously loved duty officer vehicle from City Parksville, which has turned out to be great. So Deputy Chief McCurry uses that during the week for inspections or any other business. And then the weekends, our duty officers now have a vehicle because I'm also on call on the weekend. So it gives them an opportunity to be on call, and it also gives our firefighters a vehicle to use when they're attending out-of-town meetings and training events. And there it is, all shiny. Back to emergency management. So tsunami warning systems, we're continuing to piecemeal that system together, as we know. And that's the Ampetrate system before we gutted it. So there's not, it doesn't look like that inside now. It looks pretty bare. So. And then last big event of the year, as we get near Christmas, of course, is our annual banquet. So it's a chance for us to celebrate the members, past and present, as well as the families and the businesses who support us as a fire department, because without the support of the families and the businesses in this town, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. And I threw this picture in because those are the real heroes. There is the spouses and the families that allow us to devote so much time to the community and giving back to the town, and just the time they spend away from their families for studying and the call-outs in the middle of the night. So so we wouldn't be able to do it without these nice people. Part of the thing we do at the annual banquet is award our firefighter of the year, and we don't have written criteria for that. It's usually a consensus of the chief officers. We review the year, who did really well, and we look at the whole big picture. Anyways, go ahead, Joe. So last year was Adam Howe, and Adam is a guy that when I got here 5 years ago, I could see him he was disinterested and wasn't really buying into the training. And over time, we were sort of really able to, I don't know what happened, but we were able to get his mindset to do a 180 where he has just excelled at the training. He's just buying it up, wanting to do more, doesn't want to be an officer. He's maintained that, yet he's secretly working on all his officer training. So he's actually one of our higher qualified senior firefighters, and he's just become a real treat to have around. So he's always the first one offering to help. Because he lives close to the fire hall, oftentimes, a couple times he's come over and he says, "Chief, I got an extra hour today. Do you need me to do anything?" Like, I got an hour where I got nothing, and that's how he rolls. So well deserved. We had a lot of great members, and so it wasn't easy, but Adam is certainly deserving of that. A new award we came up with last year. The members wanted to honor Ted. Ted was really big on attendance and commitment, as we know. So we decided to make the Ted Evetink Attendance Award on behalf of Ted. And it just happened to be Adam. We had actually picked the Firefighter of the Year before the Attendance Award, so we didn't even know who was going to get the Attendance Award, other than I know we had a bunch of firefighters that had some really good attendance. So it just turns out that Adam had the highest attendance at training. So we looked at training, call-outs, and community events as the 3 factors for the Attendance Award. So, Firefighter Howe was a recipient of that as well. And there's most of our crew on a nice sunny day. It's a pretty thin crew there. We're missing a few, but anyways. And that's all I have, unless if council has any questions, concerns, comments, I'll gladly take them.
Thank you, Chief.
My pleasure.
Questions from council? Councillor Hoare?
It's just an odd one and semantics probably. What is the difference on your little chart of all your call outs between ambulance assists and medical aid? Because they're separate, but I'm like,
Yeah, through the mayor. So an ambulance assist is a time where the ambulance calls us, usually after the fact, where they need an extra set of hands for a lift, or maybe access through a gate, a municipal gate, or help getting somebody down a trail, or So it's not something we're called to automatically. Where a medical aid call is one where because of when somebody calls 911 and says, "My dad's having a heart attack," so they'll automatically send fire and ambulance to those calls. So this is one that wouldn't necessarily, when the caller called 911, wouldn't necessarily qualify for a fire response, but ambulance shows up on scene and needs more help, basically.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other questions from council? I was hoping that Adam Howe could be here so we could congratulate him on both those awards today, but he's stuck in Port Alberni apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, but be sure and give him our thanks and congratulations.
Will do. Thank you.
And the Porsche Club didn't come this past year, right? So, and that's normally where you do the barbecue down at Big Beach. So you just did the barbecue without the Porsche Club, is that right?
Yeah, through the mayor. Yeah, that's right. And we haven't heard from the Porsche Club again this year, so we're assuming they're not coming again this year. So. Yeah.
Okay. Although I hear that Spout Ball is on this year.
Yes, through the mayor. Good segue. Yes, so it's part of the Whale Fest, and again, that was spearheaded by firefighter Howe and his competitive spirit. He's challenged the Tofino Fire Department to a match of Spout Ball at right over here the morning of the Chowder Chow Down. So
that's moved to the first weekend. So it's kind of the kickoff to the Whale Festival. I think it's March 16th is where Spout Ball will be out here at the courts,
yes.
and then the Chowder Chow Down at the main hall. That'll be a great day. Glad to have it back. It's been quite a few years.
It has been, yeah. Most of my team is new to that, other than a few of my 10-year members. But most of them aren't familiar with Spout Ball, so it'll be new for a lot of our members as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your report.
My pleasure. One final note is a big one, actually. It's the 75th anniversary of the fire department this year. We were founded in 1949, so working with the Firefighters Association to come up with something in the middle of summer, whether it's a barbecue or some sort of community event where we celebrate that. So
that's great. Thanks for letting us know.
Thanks.
All right, the second report item is 8.2, Harbor Manager Report. February 15th update. This will be presented by our Harbor Manager, Mr. Courts.
So since sorry about that. There you go. Since our last meeting, quite a few things have happened. I'm just going to update you guys on what's happened around the harbor. We've had the pile driver returned finally from Tofino. They did the work at the float house, and he installed 5 very large steel pilings, so he should be well secured now from the weather and the wind. Also, the broken piling that we've had since 2015 at the outer basin has been repaired, and now that's working well with WCMRC, who has their 83-foot vote there the last couple of days. I'm not sure if that's staying or if it's just in for a few days. The fire that Rick alluded to in January, it took a while to work with DFO and the insurance company, but finally, before the pile driving company left, they were awarded the contract to remove the vessel, and they did on the 27th of November. So it sat on the bottom until that point, but it's gone. Now the only thing that is remaining that DFO is working with the insurance company is the burnt dock. So there's about 60 feet of burnt dock at the end there that I can't tie vessels to. The Main Street dock. So with the sea lions, which we'll get to on 52 steps, we had one hop up on the Main Street dock where the flotation is. Now the inspection plate on the flotation of that dock is at the top, and as it sat there, it just seeped water into it and kind of sunk that flotation on that end, which I've fixed and redrained out. And then the rest is just ongoing replacements of rotten wood on the top of the deck, which is just an ongoing battle with that. So, and then we will get to the plan to expand upon the whiskey dock. On 52 steps, it was acknowledged and probably a year ago that we might have an issue with a couple trees down there. Misfortune was able to contract a company to come in and remove the danger trees. So there was a large hemlock that was growing out of a rotten piece of cedar that in the wind was moving a little bit more than I was comfortable with, and a couple alders that were growing into the hydro lines. So one's on the left-hand side as you go down the stairs, and the other's on the right. The one on the left is district property. The other one was in your guys' it's a private property, but it's where your septic line comes up. So you had right away. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. So those were removed. In January, I attended the HAABC annual AGM in Prince Rupert this time. So it was a 3-day event, met with all the DFO as well as the program officer as well as her boss and her boss's boss. So it was a good meeting. It was jam-packed full of information. One of the things that was good for us was the SHIP Source Oil Pollution Fund, which has been in effect since the late 70s, he said. Even though I worked 21 years at a fuel dock, I never knew it existed. So ideally, it's funded by industry. So if there's an oil spill that happens and any labor or materials, we go to that fund and put the little report together, which they do, and they pay us for it. So no questions asked, send it in, he stamps it, and it's done. So it's a huge resource for us pushing forward. Hopefully we don't have anything, but if anything comes up, at least we know that that's in our back pocket and it's not something that we would expend. Because up to this point, that cost was either with industry when I was in it, or now with you guys with my budgetary stuff for oil pads and spill response and all the rest of the stuff. At least we can be funded on that. I was able to tour, there was a small group that went up to Port Ed Harbor. They have a beautiful facility there, probably about 3 times the size of ours. 2 drive-on docks. They have an upland area with storage facilities for nets and gear. It's a slightly different operation, but it's nice to see what other harbors are doing, and it's a great resource for me. So I've made good connections with those group. And then, of course, Darren Williams from League and Law, who is the HAABC's free lawyer, so to speak. We have amount of time we can have questions. We can go to him and his company, League and Law. So he had a Q&A for the entire Harbor Authority. So there were some interesting questions on governance and conflict resolution issues and liabilities that went with that. So yeah, it was a good meeting. So also on there is my vessel count information. That's pretty much my report.
Thank you. Can you tell me what other types of vessels means? Because you've got commercial, recreational, charter, and other.
So I have government. We got WCMRC. Ones don't classify under commercial or recreational, or it's just like the Parks boats, the RCM SAR vessel, RCMP vessel. I classify other.
Great, thank you. Questions from council? No, that's great. Thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
The third report item is 8.3 Whiskey Dock Expansion Project. This will be presented by the Director of Community Services, Ms. Fortune, and I love your new title.
Oh. I've got to grow. There's just no question about it. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before you, you have a Whiskey Dock Expansion Project that we're asking for your support for a maximum of $30,000 in 2024. This is funded through the harbor. It's not a tax. It's not a tax cost. And the intent is to allow the the District of Ucluelet Whiskey Dock to become more versatile and flexible with the addition of 160 lineal feet around the current Whiskey Dock mooring space around the perimeter of the wharf. The additional space would not only support commercial fisheries and charter fleet, but free up existing moorage space to allow float planes to have more space. And are there any questions that I can answer?
I had one. It looks like it's sort of an L shape, and so it's below the upper Whiskey Dock, but it's dock. It's like it's on the water, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason why on the, let's call it the southwest side, is we don't have the moorage. We don't have the uplands moorage on that one. Whiskey Dock has the upland moorage on that one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Um,
Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, through the mayor, looking at the little schematic here, assuming this gets built, assuming float planes start using the Whiskey Dock, it would be the existing Whiskey Dock that the float planes would tie up to, and the new dock that would then accommodate the fisheries vessels?
That's correct. Yes. So right now, if you look at the little schematic where it says Whiskey Dock right now, that's where the boats are tying up to, so they can unload and load their equipment and food, etc. But with the expansion of the moorage, lineal moorage, then with the lower docks, we'll be able to do that. Only the really big boats load from top. Kevin, correct? Yeah.
Councillor Hoare?
So I'm curious, through the mayor, low docks like that and sea lions. What have you
I'm
got?
going to pass that one off.
The same as any of the other docks, 52 steps or the Whiskey Dock that is existing. So there is always a chance of getting sea lions on any flotation that's in the harbor. I don't think it would be a deterrent to adding dock space. Either they would be on that dock or they'd be all piling on the one dock. So I don't see it as a deterrent. So.
Any other questions?
I have one that sort of ties into the delegation that we had from Harbor Air, and I'm wondering to what extent this expansion is motivated by the desire to accommodate float planes. Like to what extent are these things tied? And if we approve this, and if we expand the dock, is that tacit to agreeing to the proposal that Harbor Air has put on the table?
Yeah, it's a good question, and through the mayor, if I might answer that. This has been on the books for a little bit in terms of planning. It's something that Kevin and I have wanted to do for a bit. Yes, it does address some of the harbor air or any float plane. We are a float plane aerodrome, and so that is already pre-set up on this area. What we're trying to do is accommodate more of our commercial vessels as well as our leisure vessels as well on that space. It does address a little bit of the area and to ensure that we do have space for our boats as well. It's not solely driven by Harbor Air. We are an actual float plane landing area. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But I suppose it raises another, because like the way that I'm looking at it is really, this seems the dates, if Harbor Air ends up running these flights,
yes,
they're going to need access to that dock throughout the whole summer. And so that's typically when there's the highest demand on dock space to begin with. So I'm looking at this and I'm sort of imagining a scenario where this dock is basically getting built to shunt boats out of the way to free up the Whiskey Dock for float planes. So it's not necessarily creating more space for boats. It's just moving boats to new space.
Through the mayor, it's creating access for on the lower deck for the boats, because currently they are very limited, just the one finger for access for the boats. So if you've got one boat there, it's covering up the whole area, and it's actually currently covering up what is in fact a seaplane landing area or a disembarking area. and so we can shuttle the boats around a little. Yes, you are correct on that end, but it creates a better use of the space. And I'm just going to turn to our harbor manager to see if he's got anything to add through the mayor.
I've been trying for years to develop that area for management purposes. It is an aerodrome, so anytime that I get Tofino Air, Harbor Air, Kenmore Air call me, we've got a seaplane coming in at 2 o'clock. Then I go down there and there's a vessel tied to that dock. I have to scramble to get it moved. There's times that I have draggers that I have to move by ropes out of the way. I'm trying to do a management issue that I can now tell them, you can't park here, you're going to be moored on the dock. And by doing so, if they're saying, well, we can't get our gear from the top of the ramp, top of the dock, to our boat on a low tide. Well, now you have a dock alongside, no different than where they are there, but managing it's a lot easier. To that extent, where I'm putting in steel pilings as they're breaking the pilings, double fold, this dock now will keep them off our pilings. So it also helps in that aspect.
Thank you.
This was part of the harbor master plan, was it not?
That is correct.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Councillor Hoare?
I'm just thinking about how busy that area in the harbor is in the summer and the addition of regular flights. I'm thinking about hake season and how many boats are coming and going from UHS and in that area and tied up and fueling or grubbing up and all of those things. And I didn't voice it when the delegation was here, but it's just my concern about adding harbor air traffic to the already, in some cases, very busy summer high season traffic for boats.
If I can address that, I think they're only going to be there for maybe 20 minutes at a time. Is that correct?
Yeah. Through the mayor, that is correct. It's through the mayor. It's rather limited in their timing, and obviously people would know the schedule relatively quickly. In terms of that, it is a concern, and it is a part of the growth, and it is something that was identified through the harbor master plan. So that's where we're sitting at the moment.
What?
Go ahead.
On that note, though, I understand. It sort of seems like the timing, these two things are getting conflated. The proposal from Harbor Air, but there are already float planes that are coming in and out. So I'm just speaking out loud here. I'm not necessarily asking a question, but the way that I see it, this proposal to expand the dock is beneficial, and it's still going to create a more streamlined. It's going to streamline the process of balancing the needs of float planes and commercial vessels, but it doesn't necessarily, I hope it doesn't necessarily put us in a position where if we approve this, then we have to say, oh yeah, now we're also going to have daily flights coming in and out. Like I see this as beneficial, even though I don't see the benefit of daily flights. So I think as long as these two things are separate, then.
I think they are separate. This has been in the harbor master plan for quite some time, and Kevin has stated how awkward it is with just that one dock there for the large boats when a float plane does need to come in. So there is a staff recommendation if someone would like to make that. Councillor Anderson?
I would move the council acting as the Harbor Authority approve the Whiskey Dock expansion project as described in report number 24-12 up to a maximum of $30,000 for 2024.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? No? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question that's sort of maybe more generally directed to the harbor master? What's your take on Harbor Air's proposal and what's required on your end before they can move forward? I was a little bit surprised that they basically, it almost felt like they were like, hey, we're doing this and we just wanted to let you know. And personally, I was like, oh, well, surely there must be more steps before we start seeing daily flights for the public to weigh in. But how do you look at this all?
Yeah, so from my take, not in any authoritative, but in a management aspect of it, if they decided to come in once or twice or 3 times a week and told me I'm coming in at 2 o'clock or I'm coming at 3 o'clock, I still have to manage them, that space. So the schedule is the question for you guys, if that's what you guys want. But if they were to call me, or Tofino Ware once again, or Kenmore, which is my 3 main ones that'll come into the harbor, I have to make sure that space is available for them to land. So with them coming and saying that they need to go to Transport Canada, I've already had talks with Harbour Air prior, 3 years ago, as well as recently. There's not a whole lot of changes I need to do to that dock. There's a few cleats for tie-off reasons. I need to make sure that there's enough tires for them, but stuff that they have. But it's pretty basic and cosmetic. Now, if they need it reserved for certain times, then that's signage. So I would need to put up, this area must be clear from 12:20 or whatever they had till 12:50. Then that's what we would have to do. It'd be reserved, no different than a charter vessel reserving, except they would be on scheduled times.
Okay. I guess my question is, like, at this point, if a fishing boat was going to come in every single day, they would just do that. There'd be no public consultation. There'd be no input. That's their right, their prerogative, and that's what the facility's there for. Does that also apply to what Harbour Air wants to do to run scheduled flights?
In my opinion, without further investigation, I would say yes. Once again, if they decided to come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, said, Kevin, we're coming Monday to Friday, we're going to be there at 12 to 12:50, I still have to facilitate that for them because it's an aerodrome.
Okay.
Right, that's a responsibility that from Transport Canada divesting it to the district, and it still was remained. It's not to my knowledge, has never been canceled. That's what the little triangle at the end of that dock states, that anybody that's flying over needs to land. That's where they need to go.
Thank you.
Great. The next report item is 8.4, Small Craft Harbor Head Lease Renewal. And this will also be presented by the Director of Community Services.
Yeah, long-awaited head lease. Yay.
Yes, yay.
So before you have the updated head lease, and the recommendation is to have the council acting as the harbor authority authorize the corporate officer to execute the head lease for 5 years. Now you'll notice it starts at 2022, and I was wanting to address that. So it is the 5 year from 2022 to 2027. That's when our old head lease ran out, even though we've been operating on a month-to-month basis. DFO backdates it, just so I wanted to let you guys know. And there is the appendix attached. I've had a look at it. Our harbor manager has had a look at it. DFO, Small Craft Harbors, has had a look at it. We've all done our through. And this is the new head lease that is standard throughout the province of British Columbia.
Which took them a very long time to get to us.
We were actually one of the quicker ones, believe it or not.
Wow. And I see here under the background it says the lease automatically renews for 3 consecutive 5-year terms.
That's correct.
So we won't be put in this position again.
That is correct, through the mayor.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Fortune? There.
One quick one.
Okay.
It didn't look like this changes the who pays for what on repairs and things. It's all kind of standard as it has been.
Through the mayor, yes, you are correct, yes.
Okay, there is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
I've got it.
Councillor Hoare.
I will move that council, acting as the harbor authority, authorize the corporate officer to execute the head lease as proposed by the Department of Fisheries Small Craft Harbor under Section 4, subsection 2 of the Federal Real Property Regulations, SOR 92-502, and acting through the Regional Director of Small Craft Harbors by virtue of a delegation under Section 3 of the Federal Real Property and Federal Immovables Act, SC 1991, Chapter 50, for the term of 5 years, 2022 to 2027, between the District of Ucluelet and Department of Fisheries Small Craft Harbor. I think I did that right.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. The next report item is 8.5 Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act Opt-in Options. This report will be presented by the Director of Community Planning, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. And through the mayor, as this report lays out, and this is the first of a few housing-related, time-sensitive items that are going to be coming in front of council over the next months. That this last fall, the province adopted Bill 35, which is the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. It came into effect in early December. One aspect of this new piece of legislation requires that a short-term rental would be located in the host's principal residence, and that becomes applicable as of May 1st in communities with populations that are over 10,000. In Ucluelet, which is a resort municipality, we're exempt from that requirement, from the principal residence requirement under the new provincial act, but we, as other resort municipalities, have the ability to opt in to that component. So a little bit of background. About a year and a half ago, Ucluelet enacted some zoning and business licensing bylaw changes to add that same kind of principal residence requirement into our own regulations. So for those properties, this new principal residence requirement in the provincial act really poses little change. However, that was really about bed and breakfast in single-family residential properties, and we have other types of short-term accommodation which would be affected by the new provincial legislation. And that's part of the way our zoning is written. So what is exempt in the provincial legislation is hotels and motels, and so they're defined. But we have things like guest house, guest cabin, hostel, vacation rental, resort condo, numerous properties that have been purpose-built for tourist accommodation. And at this point in time, as this is very new legislation and the regulations are sort of coming into effect, it's not clear whether there's going to be some greater flexibility for communities to define in a little finer grain within our zoning what this would apply to or not. I'd say that it seems, but again, this is new and we're learning about this as we go. There may be some advantages for communities who aren't automatically affected by the regulations to opt in, particularly if it affects or changes how the province's role in monitoring and enforcement rolls out. And that's something that'll be a year from now when we sort of see all the details of that. So that we're not sure if it's going to make a difference or if there would be a real sort of advantage to be opting into this legislation. So, but given the sort of uncertainty and understanding that there may be some unintended consequences if the district were to just opt in without understanding what could be done within the zoning, we're recommending that there isn't a need to rush. And as I said, there might be some unintended hardships that some properties would see. So the function is that if a community wants to opt in, it's a motion of council and a letter to the province by March of each year, and that would then come into effect the following November to give property owners some heads up and time to adjust. So this could be revisited a year from now, and that, as I said, many of our operations, we already have this principal residence requirement in place. It's working for the bed and breakfasts, so we're suggesting there isn't a need to rush. Other than that, I'd see if there's any questions from council.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. This was a hot topic at the LGLA conference earlier this month.
I imagine.
There were some sessions on it about the new bills, but we also had some conversations with the one and only Tofino councillor that attended that conference with us, and Tofino is looking at this same opportunity, whether they want to opt in or not. I definitely agree not to rush because we do have some unique properties that have a mix of people that live there and nightly rentals. And under the new legislation, the nightly rentals would have to be eliminated to make room for full-time residents. So that could actually jeopardize our resort municipality status because it's the number of beds. The number of beds for tourists has to exceed the number of beds for residents in order to be a resort municipality. And so if we eliminated a bunch of nightly rental beds, we could lose that status. So that's one unintended thing that might happen if we opt in. So yeah, any questions from councillors?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
To what you just said. Is that a proportional number? Well, I guess it is. So I'm just curious about how, we're talking about increasing the density of town, and if it has to be a number of beds exceeding the number of long-term, are we not heading down the path of eliminating our resort municipality status through this densification with no STRs allowed and no B&Bs allowed?
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, that's just something to think about. And I have a question for Bruce. I was speaking to, I can't remember who it was, from the Sunshine Coast, and they said the opt-in had to be done every year. Is this true, or?
Through the mayor, I won't speak definitively on what is true or not, because I can only talk about how my understanding is today and how it's evolving. There have been numerous calls with lawyers and provincial staff and explaining all the legislation, and there are some things that frankly are not crystal clear. My understanding of it is that it's not an annual opt-in, that there's the wording in the act seems to suggest to me that a community would say, okay, we want to opt in, and then there's also provision for opting out. But that opting out for communities, it speaks to, do you have a certain minimum rental vacancy rate and that kind of thing. So we'd want to understand all of that before, I think, making a decision one way or another. It is definitely, I just want to acknowledge, it's an area of some controversy in a lot of communities, particularly like larger communities. It's not an option. It's now it's applying. So I think everyone's aware there's quite a discussion in Parksville, I believe, about some of their zoning, which is it's questionable. Like, okay, it's not a hotel, it's not a motel, but it was intended to be tourist accommodation, and how does this impact it? We'll probably know more in the coming weeks or months, and hopefully we can provide a little more clarity on these things.
Thanks.
Councillor Anderson?
Just through the mayor, I was going to add on to that at the LGLA there was an interesting topic that came up, and it does make you start to think when you're part of a municipality and you're making these decisions that you're facing these blanket legislations from the province. It's interesting because it sometimes seems like a great idea that it's going to solve these problems. There's interesting hiccups that happen along the way. The Parksville one, I was reading in the province last night, but even before that at the LGLA, I think Penny Cote, the head of the AVICC, had mentioned that in Sprout Lake, in their jurisdiction, they're big enough that they're automatically opted in. They're part of that, but a lot of the accommodation that tourists use to go to Sprout Lake are STRs that are now technically illegal, and they only have one hotel with 6 bedrooms, and for that whole swath there. So she said there was just like a large number that sort of hurts that region there. So they're trying to they're kind of scrambling right now to figure that out. So it's just more of a comment. It's an interesting situation when there's like this blanket legislation. It might be kind of like weird in some places where it doesn't totally fit. But yeah, that's my only comment.
And you attended one of the sessions about highest best use.
Right.
And so can you describe that a little bit?
I'm trying to remember if it was anything like really to do with STRs there.
Well, it was about zoning.
Right. Yeah, and the examples were weren't totally applicable to us, I found. Like, I thought there might be something that might have to do with say something that would be in a potential transportation corridor in like the middle of Ucluelet or something like that, where or if there was another idea I thought if there was like a cul-de-sac or a small community and one person in that community divided up their single family house into a multi-family house, would now, because the value of that house, say it's sold a year after they did that, now that value of that house is much more because they have 3 units in that house, whereas everyone else in that little community has basically the same single family house. Would they be paying that premium now? Would their assessment go up? it was just the answer was people kept asking basically the same question, and it was Graham Held, who's the representative for BC Assessment. It was the same answer every time. He's like, time will tell. He can't tell because it's they have to get the data, and they don't know. And I was like, well, what can you predict? And he wouldn't predict. He's like, because I have to wait and find out. We have to see how things unfold. But I was like, okay, but if this happened with this, he goes, it's a market situation. He goes, we really don't know how this is going to play out, which I thought that was interesting. But as far as the examples from that particular session went, I mean, it was this one where he said it was not really applicable to us. It was somewhere where they had like a tire store that could potentially be an apartment building. And then he goes, it looks like it would be, but then there's a rail yard right next to it where the trains all connect. So he's like, so that didn't make sense. So that was not super applicable to us. So that was the only answer that I got out of that was we won't know until
we know
it happens, and then the following year when the assessments come in, and people will have had to have sold as well to get that actual market adjustment, as far as I understood it. Might have understood it.
Yeah, the BC assessment sessions were really, really interesting at that conference.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, they totally were, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question that relates specifically to the analysis of options here. For option number 2 that I note staff don't recommend, which would be to basically put it to public engagement right away. It says that there's an anticipated compromise, that the process is anticipated to be compromised by limited time and resources. And I'm just wondering what the timeline is. To what extent are we just delaying the inevitable? Because if we have to revisit this later on, what's the timeline that staff feel is going to be compromised if we bring this to the community now versus waiting until some point as of yet indeterminate in the future?
Through the mayor. So the deadline for the province is March 31st. So this is really, if council were keen to opt in and were to pass a motion, we'd suggest, this is a big change, and we'd suggest some consideration be given to what kind of community information or engagement or input you want to seek before making that decision, and do as much of that as we can in a very, very short timeline, like in this next month. We have a few other things to tackle too, and so that's the language in there. Really, like, we're recommending that we don't see a compelling advantage, and there may be some real concern in the community. So March 31st would be the deadline next year as well. Within this next year, we're hoping that we understand the legislation and the regulations that are coming from the province, some of which we haven't seen yet, and the guidelines coming from the province, and any adjustments they make. We're hoping that we'll understand this a lot better than we have been able to figure out since they adopted this in December and started rolling out information, which, as I said, is incomplete. So it's really like, okay, within the next months, we're hoping the picture will be a lot clearer, and so at this time next year, we'd have a much clearer picture of, like, okay, is there an advantage? What are the pros and cons, and can we avoid the unintended consequences? To make that a much more informed decision. That said, if council saw a reason and there was interest in opting in, then certainly we would do very quickly, okay, how can we get the word out? What kind of information can we put in people's hands, complete or not, and provide that to council before that sort of decision is made. As I said before, I think we suggested that it would be really the latest is, I think, March 26th or something. A few days before the deadline, there is a council meeting on the schedule. So we would try and aim for that to bring it to council, if that were council's choice.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a sort of a comment regarding this. Our current zoning bylaws already cover off everything that's in this legislation that's known. It's the unknowns that we are worried about. So I like the flexibility of not having our hands tied. We could be more restrictive if we want to, or we can back off if we need to, if we start to lose control of our funding through resort municipality grants. This just gives us more flexibility, and we can go to the public and ask them if we're being strict enough or not. But if we give it up to the legislation and then the interpretation comes back to, oh God, you know, everybody with a crawl space has to have 5 families living in there because it's in the legislation. So, you know, there's certain parts of the legislation too that we're more restrictive on, because under the legislation you can nightly rent an accessory dwelling unit if you want, or a secondary suite with a kitchen, which you can't currently do in Ucluelet. So I don't know if we can. We can cherry pick parts of the legislation on our own, but we can't sort of, once we opt in, we're subject to those rules. And I just think, you know, Ucluelet's always been flexible. Like, that's how B&Bs came about, because there was a time when we needed them. And yeah, I do support the primary residence clause that we have. I think that's just good policy, and I think we've gone far enough.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hoare?
I concur with Councillor Kennington. The unintended consequences are what's a little concerning here, and we do have something in place that is pretty good for the moment, and we can see how it plays out. We have these unusual zonings as well that, you know, guest house zoning. I do believe 2 members of council have guest house zoning. How would that affect it, right? Like, and there's too many unknowns. So I'm fully supportive of option A.
Any other comments?
I concur with both of those points, and I'm of the same mind. My only concern coming in, seeing this on the agenda, was just I know that there's been a lot of talk in the community and Tofino regionally that this is something that I've had a number of conversations about. I think that it's just important to at least go on the record, even just in this meeting, and just assure people that we're not, you know, sweeping this under the rug, never to be dealt with again. And I think that's something that some folks that haven't taken the time to sort of get informed might think might be happening. And so I think it's important that people are aware that if we're trying to buy time, it's for a good reason, so that we can approach it in a much more logical, rational way, rather than saying, oh yeah, we don't care about this isn't a problem, business as usual, because I think that's bound to upset a lot of people. So I'm not saying I'm fully in support of option 1 as well, but I would really hope and expect and push, if need be, to make sure that this is something that we do get public input on, and, you know, come March of next year, we're in a position to make a much more informed decision. So to anyone who's watching or gonna look at the video later and wonder, well, is this ever gonna be revisited? I hope the answer is a definite yes. And
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, you're going to probably get tired of us bringing forward housing information and questions for council this year. There's a lot more to follow, and absolutely that I think public input on every piece that we can is going to be important. One thing I should point out, the opting in portion, I should emphasize in case someone's listening, or is really specific to the principal residence component of this legislation. Other parts apply, and that's not optional. It applies. So one of the things, there's some parts of the legislation around lawful non-conforming uses, and we will bring more detail forward on that. But that's not something that is optional. It's just how the province has now changed the laws in BC, and that's like all communities. So.
And that has to do with not allowing grandfathering in, correct?
Yes. So for the short-term vacation rentals, if there are some that are operating in manners that are lawfully non-conforming, then the legislation that protects those uses that would allow them to be grandfathered, to sort of the layperson term for those uses to be able to continue. That legislation applies to other uses, say an industrial use that was put in place before the zoning said something different. Those are still protected under legislation and decades of case law in BC. The short-term accommodation as of May 1st is not. So that is a change that is coming in province-wide.
Exactly. All right, there is a recommendation. Who would like to move that?
I'll move that council not opt in to the provincial principal residence requirement under the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act for the properties operating short-term rental accommodations at this time, and that council directs staff to report back within the next year as greater detail becomes available on how the new legislation and regulations will apply to different classes of accommodation service providers in addition to hotels and motels.
Thank you, Councillor Kennington. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to use this opportunity to go back to what we talked about right at the beginning in the question about the proportion of beds and maintaining our resort municipality designation. Is there anything that to that end that's being worked into our projections and where we're going and our growth strategy, or is it just not even registered in our like, what are we going to do about that? Because that's like a hand grenade that just got lobbed into my brain.
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, I know there's a motion on the floor, but I'd be happy to talk to that question if you know, I don't know if it, I'm not sure what the appropriate timing to get into that topic is.
I guess I would just like to know or set up that maybe we need to talk about that, whether that's a report or you know, as part of our strategy, our OCP, whatever it is. I'd like to just make sure that doesn't get swept under the rug and we bring that into the conversation going forward as far as growth is concerned, and whether we have an appetite to maintain resort municipality status or not.
We have a resort municipality mayor's meeting on March 6th. There's 14 of us, and I'm sure that topic is going to come up about this legislation and how it affects us.
Because it might make more sense to like not have that a proportional thing and to be, you know, a certain number of beds so that we can grow long-term accommodations and restrict short-term accommodations just by making that change there, as opposed to having to carry half of our beds to short-term rental, because I don't think anybody wants that.
That would be a province decision. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, and I just wanted to add the to the question that aside from this opting in option, this piece of legislation, there's other legislation we're going to be bringing pieces forward to you. One of the requirements that we have, there's a timeline on doing a housing needs assessment, revisiting the OCP and our zoning, and that whole growth discussion is absolutely going to be on the table. So this is very much something we're aware of, and
Okay.
that will be a community discussion of what is that balance within the new provincial requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Great. The final report item is 8.6, legislative changes related to public hearings. This report will be presented by the Manager of Corporate Services, Mr. Rotenberg.
Through the mayor. This report is about another provincial change to how the district does business. In particular, what it addresses is a new prohibition on public hearings that applies to very specific circumstances. Generally speaking, the Local Government Act has now been amended under to include Section 464 sub 3, and where all of the things on your screen apply there, a public hearing is now prohibited. Council may not hold a public hearing. So those things right there are an OCP is in effect for the subject lands. The zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the OCP. The sole purpose is to permit development that is in whole or part residential development, and, so that's the key thing, and all of the above. The residential component is 50% or more of the gross floor area. This is a big change for the community, right? We've historically had public hearings for most zoning amendments, and this council has not decided in the past to not have public hearings, which is also an option in very specific circumstances. So it's a big change to community expectation. A further prohibition applies where the sole purpose of the bylaw is complying with Section 481.3. In UCLUIT, our understanding of Section 481.3 of the Local Government Act is it requires zones restricted to single-family dwellings to allow at least one secondary suite or ADU. So if there was a bylaw that introduced amendments and its sole purpose was to do this, a public hearing would also be prohibited. So those are the two new prohibitions. So it gets a little more weird here. Even though we're prohibited from providing a public hearing, we have to give notice before first reading of the bylaw. So that notice has to do these things, has to outline the bylaw's purpose, land subject to the bylaw, the date of the first reading, and the place, times, and dates where the bylaw can be inspected. It's got to be published a very specific way in accordance with Section 94 of the Community Charter, and there's posting requirements, and in certain circumstances, mailing, delivery requirements, and then content requirements, which I won't go into detail about. Now, the question before council is a procedural question. The question we're looking for an answer to at this point is, does council want us to give notice where these provisions apply, where the prohibition applies, and then see the bylaw? Or would council like to either see the bylaw or the application, direct staff to give notice, and then see the draft bylaw after notice, and then consider readings on the draft bylaw after notice? So that's the focused discussion we're looking for here. The recommendation today is this two-step process: notice, draft bylaw presented for readings and potentially adoption, all in the same meeting. And then the alternative is this sort of three-step process, or either council could see the bylaw or else they could see the application, then we could give notice, and then we can present the bylaw for readings and potentially adoption all at the same meeting. That's another substantial change for council here. Usually this sort of 24-hour rule applies to most bylaws. There's an exemption to that rule when it comes to OCP amendments and zoning amendment bylaws, and because of the way that the prohibition on public hearings functions, effectively council can be in a position now, after giving notice, to give 3 readings and adopt the zoning amendment bylaw all in the same meeting. Obviously, I'm here to answer the questions that I can. We are living through a changing time in legislation, and we're doing our best to understand how this works, and we're doing our best to understand how this could or may change some of our processes here. And a great friend once told me that he looked very calm on the surface, but he was like a duck. His feet were moving very quickly. And I think that a lot of your staff here are in that situation right now, trying to find ground where there is none.
Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg. The biggest difference between option A and B that I see is that option A expedites the rezoning process, and option B delays the process by 3 to 4 weeks.
Because of the way that, because we give notice through our newspapers, we've got to time the publishing dates.
Right.
So yes. The other difference here is effectively when SCAF gives notice, they're making a judgment call, and their belief in that circumstance is that the bylaw is OCP compliant. The difference here is if we went to the 3-step process, council would effectively be saying we think that this is OCP compliant. That's why you should be giving notice of no public hearing.
Right.
Along those same lines, if council makes, or if staff makes a judgment call and they're wrong, and council determines that it's not OCP compliant, we would have to give notice again. So we'd roll back the process, and you would see a zoning amendment bylaw. You'd see notice of a zoning amendment bylaw and an OCP amendment.
Questions for Mr. Rotenberg? Councillor Anderson?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get my head around this one, and yeah, there's parts of it that that definitely, like, they make sense because they streamline, and other parts it kind of feels like it's taking something away that could be important. And right when I first looked at this, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there a possibility that if you're council could literally see a proposed bylaw change by reading it in the newspaper first.
Yes.
All right.
You gotta start
That
buying
seems-
newspapers.
Well, it's never been more important to read the newspaper, I guess. Oh God. Yeah, I'm wrestling with that. Like I realize that there's red tape and things can drag on, but at the same time, it does seem odd that there's a potentially major decision that gets made, and I know, Jen, you often get approached by people at work, and I don't know if you haven't even seen it yet, and you're already getting people inquiring. I don't know.
It's just a proposal, though, right? Like, it's not as if the change. I hear what you're saying, but it's not. It's
Right.
not like you'd open the paper and be like, "Oh wow, okay, this is crazy." It's just the proposal that we wouldn't necessarily be the very first ones to see, or that everyone would have the same chance to see it at the same time.
Right.
But we could still say, "Whoa, hold on, no, like proposal rejected" later on.
Second and third reading.
Yeah.
Still going to come after that, right? That's right.
I'd just like to offer a correction. So first reading would come after the notice. So notice would be in the newspaper and on our public notice posting places, and it would give notice of first reading of the bylaw. So the bylaw would not have progressed at all at the time of notice. So notice would be given. That first reading will occur. That council will consider first reading on X date, and that would be the meeting that you consider first reading at. And obviously, at that point in time, council could decline to give first reading.
I think the point of this legislation was to streamline the process and to get permits through faster, to provide more housing, obviously. So that's why I'm leaning toward option A, because I think that that's at the heart of the legislation. But I'm open to more comments. Councillor Hoare?
Maybe it's a query, and I'm not sure if Mr. Rodenberg knows the answer. And yes, I guarantee somebody will come up to me and comment about it when I have not even seen it in this case, which could be kind of fun. At least the Westerly is delivered to the store, so I'd be able to get a copy pretty quick. Would this be somewhere that we could use the notice of motion at the previous council? Could we be like, the notice of motion would include, say, notice of a bylaw update, look at next week's Westerly or something, right? Like, I'm just wondering if it's some way that we have, that little heads up that I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there because I don't want to be caught over the apples with absolutely no knowledge.
I'm going to take a stab at this through the mayor. I've seen in some communities at times where in their procedures it would be not necessarily a notice of motion, but there may be an information item on a council agenda that is like application received, and here's sort of the basic outline, so that council gets on an agenda, which could be while we've just received an application, it's under review, maybe we're waiting for engineering or highways or someone to comment on it. Like this, there's a bunch of work that goes on before it gels in these smoothly written staff reports that you see. While that's going on, it could just be, here's an application, no comment on it. It's just for information so that council and the community see it and have some awareness of it ahead of, no analysis, no recommendation, no discussion really. It's just, it's there and everyone sees it. And that could be before then notice is going out, I think, unless we see that otherwise.
The other option, which we've seen in other communities as well, is that there's an application that comes before council, and it's in general terms. We've had an application to rezone this property like this, like blah. And the question to council is, would you like us to draft a bylaw? And would you like us to give notice? So there's different ways of skinning this cat.
I like Mr. Gregg's idea for sure. And Mr. Lawrence, you had something?
I'm just wanted to add a comment on it. So as we understand it at this point in time, the intent of the legislation is to, as Mayor, you stated, is to try to expedite the process. The one concern that I have about putting it on in advance of any commentary is that you're putting an application without any commentary. So there's no information coming to council or the public, and there's there could be a tendency to want to discuss the application with no context and no evaluation. So this is putting a new process in place which council and community would need to adjust to over time. So the intent would be is that if council endorses option A, is that we do all the legwork, we'd put out the notice, council would get the full report in an agenda package, and then and consider it as a whole package at first reading when it's first introduced. If it's the desire to give council a heads up, or the community a heads up, then option 2 is probably the better way to go, because then it's presented, you get to review it, then direct staff to proceed if it's compliant with the OCP. But that slows the process down. So at some point, council and the community are going to see these applications for the first time eventually, right? It's going to be, oh, we've never seen this one before. That happens every time, even now with applications. So it's a little bit of process. It's a little bit of adjustment and expectations from the community. Again, this is notice that we're not actually engaging through a public hearing with the public, which is another change in process that will need to be accommodated by the community and council, as we don't really have a choice. So it's just a little bit of commentary on that process. You're going to see it for the first time eventually. At this point, it'll go out to community kind of first, which is the concern that I'm hearing from council. If it goes to council first, then we'd probably better off to go with option 2, because that gets it in front of council first, but it does slow the process down.
Councillor Hoare?
I'm not averse to expediting things. I'm not averse to getting smacked upside the head with a, random rezoning over the apples. Are we locked into, if we go with option A, are we locked into it? Could we change our minds if we discover that this is really, and back the truck up a little bit?
This is just a council motion. We're just looking for direction about how you'd like to proceed. Anytime you'd like us to change this process, we certainly can. I think because it's a council motion, we would just need another council motion.
Councillor Mafty?
I just think that one, not to argue about semantics, but it wouldn't be a random rezoning. It's like a fairly specific set of conditions, so it's not willy-nilly anything at all. It seems to be the type of stuff that we're trying to streamline because we want more of it and we want to encourage more of it by streamlining it. So I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you, but I think in my own mind the balance here is clearly in favor of taking a little bit of work off of staff's plate, encouraging people by saying, hey, if you're gonna engage in the type of development that we've identified as a priority for the community, we're gonna try to grease the rails for you a little bit. And so I think it's a net positive.
Well said.
Very well said. I'm just going to say that on the mic because it's true. It is something that's consistent with OCP, et cetera.
So it gives staff a little bit more power to expedite things, and the onus would be on us to just stay informed and read the Westerly News.
That's why they pay us the big bucks.
My
Wait, there's big bucks?
just to be the devil's advocate, and I don't necessarily feel this way, but I I think when you say my concern is, it's sort of lingering in the back of my head, is when you say it's something that we have in the OCP, and because we're expediting something that we have in the OCP, there's kind of the idea that there's some parts of that OCP that isn't ours. Like, so we're actually being forced to inherit things there. So our OCP has to be rewritten almost immediately, and there'll be things in that OCP that we're not familiar with. It's not our OCP like it was before. There's going to be pieces of that legislation in there that are being put in that you won't be familiar with. And that'll be showing up in a newspaper before you've had time to sort of digest it and think about it. There'll be things like, there'll be zoning changes in there that we haven't evolved with, and the community. So that's and again, I'm not on a soapbox here talking about that. I'm just in the back of my head. I wanted to represent that idea, just in case people were thinking about that, because I think there will be like quite large OCP changes based on the legislation. Am I correct on that?
Through the mayor, yes, there could be. Yes.
So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop progress and expediting but I just want that.
And that's where the public has a chance to have input, is on the OCP. So we write that together as a community, and basically we're writing the rule book together, and then we're going to follow those rules, and we're going to stop going back and forth on the minutia of each development, because we've agreed as a community that that's where we want to go. And so, we're going to really need to encourage the community to come out and help us write that OCP.
And I think that will happen this time, because it was during COVID when we were forming the other one, and there was really no opportunity for group discussions and information.
All right.
Any further comments? Would someone like to make a recommendation?
I'll move that when public hearings are prohibited under Section 464 of the Local Government Act, Council directs staff to present the draft zoning amendment bylaw for the first time to Council after notice has been given in accordance with Section 467 of the Local Government Act.
Thank you, Councillor Mafty.
I'll second it.
Oh, another tie. Councillor Anderson, I'll give you this one. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Good discussion, though. Really good discussion.
Could we take a bio break, please?
Yes. Are there any notices of motion? If not, can we take a 5-minute? Can I have a motion for a 5-minute break? Councillor Hoare. Seconded.
Second.
Councillor Kennington. All in favor? Great. Thank you. 5 minutes. We'll be back at 6:17.
I want to debate the legislation.
Fish Restoration Society. Redfish is seeking a letter of support for their stewardship center. A draft letter of support is attached. Any questions from council? This looks like a really great undertaking for them. They've bought the new building, what used to be Murray's, and are going to do the Redfish Restoration Stewardship Center. And they have included a draft letter of support. So a potential resolution would be that council provide Redfish Restoration Society with a letter of support for their stewardship center project. And I can make that motion.
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Further discussion?
Do we know if they're maintaining the accommodation that's on the top of that building? Or if the entire building's going to be turned into the stewardship center?
I don't know the answer to that.
I believe they are planning on a residential component.
They are, did you say?
I believe so.
Okay.
Just hating to lose a long-term
No.
residence in town. Cool. They do amazing stuff, so.
They do. Any further discussion? No, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you. The next correspondence item is 10.2, Letter of Support Request, Ucluelet Racket Sports Club. This is the late item. They are also seeking a letter of support from us. Discussion? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I got a chance to meet with Trevor and Dario, and I don't know all the ins and outs of what was happening there, and I think that letter that they gave kind of cleared up some of the things that I didn't understand, which was nice. And it sounds like they realize that there's a new in the works. There'll be a new hard surface complex out in Tugwell eventually, but it looks like they're trying to bridge that gap as long as they can, and they're not asking for things that are structural. So I had a brief talk with Mr. Lawrence about that. It didn't sound like there was anything in there that was outside of the realm of a superficial and non-structural. So they just want to prolong the life of that building just so they can use it into what hopefully will carry them to the next facility. Am I correct on this? I don't know. I think that's.
I think the one issue is that the rec hall is slated for demolition, so putting a bunch of money into it is not it's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing if it's going to be demolished. And the grantor would need to know that the plan is to demolish the building, because this is a grant that they are going for, right? Am I saying that correctly, Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that would be staff's recommendation. So as we understand what the society is looking to do, it is cosmetic. So it would all depend at the end of the day what they're actually proposing, what it is, whether or not a building permit be required. If it's just cosmetic, then there shouldn't be an issue with it, and it would improve the overall use of the building with the windows, doors, new updated floor. It would be appropriate to make sure that the granting organization understands that the facility is at the end of its useful life. It's just shy of 100-year-old building. It doesn't have a foundation. We wouldn't be able to do any structural repairs because those costs, we estimate, would be greater than the value of the building itself. So as long as the funder is under the understanding that they're going to get 4 or 5 years out of this and their investment, then the investment in the building would be welcome, because it would make it more user-friendly. It'd improve the value of the building. There's no question about that we could put a lot of money into it, but it would be important for that granting organization to understand that in the near future, we have funds in the budget in 2028 for the replacement of that. I think it's about $3 million right now. I don't think that's enough to replace the building. We'd have to go after grants. But it is slated and it is being looked at. Design work is being undertaken by Miss Fortune right now for a replacement building. So as long as those are understood, it's up to the granting organization.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
Nope.
So the Ucluelet Racket Sports Club is applying for a grant. It doesn't necessarily mean they're successful, but they are looking for a letter of support from us to make that application. So I think that we can make that a resolution rather than refer to staff to come back in 2 weeks' time. I think that's just wasting time. If somebody would like to move that we provide them with a letter of support.
Sorry, I don't have the exact verbiage in here.
Mayor, can I just let you know specifically?
You have to go to the microphone because we're on Zoom.
Thanks. Just to clarify, it's important that, and I did state this in the letter, or the board did, that the letter of support would have to also identify that you'd be willing to receive the funds and issue a charitable tax receipt. That's stipulated in the funding criteria, so I just want to make sure that's in the letter of support too, if you don't mind.
Mr. Lawrence, we can assure that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we just wing it.
Just wing it, yeah.
You want to take it?
You go ahead.
I don't know what I'm going to say. I will move that we have that council draft a letter of support for the Ucluelet Racket Sports Club to support their grant application regarding the seaplane base renovation project.
And I'll second that.
Mr. Rotenberg, did you get all that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining, okay. So that carries. You will get your letter of support.
Are you a pickler?
That was too late.
It's the co-op.
What?
It's the co-op grant they're applying for.
Oh, you can't.
I won't talk about it. I won't.
All right, the next item is the Seaview Seniors Housing Society lunch on February 28th. And I've made arrangements to attend. I have 2 ACRD meetings that day, but I'll attend them both by Zoom instead of driving to Port. So I can attend the lunch. And Councillor Anderson, you're available?
Yes.
Yes. Anyone else? Councillor Kennington?
Sure. Yes. I
Okay.
will confirm.
Yeah, confirm with Keely so she can
Yeah.
advise. And Councillor Hoare probably not, no.
I will be writing massive numbers of orders, which is what I do on Wednesdays.
Okay. The next item is 10.4 Legislative Reform Initiative Update. Did anyone attend that session at UBCM? No. It's really interesting information for sure. It's great that they forwarded it to us. Okay, there are 6 information items on the agenda. The item 11.1 is the Harbor Authority Resolution Tracker. Any questions on that? Okay. The 11.2 is the monthly RCMP policing report for January. Any comments on that? 11.3 is a request for illumination of our sign at the junction in purple for on March 26th for the BC Epilepsy Society.
I would like to support that.
That's a motion. Councillor
I will
Hoy.
move that we illuminate the sign at the junction in purple for World Epilepsy Day on March 26th, 2024.
I'll second that.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? I think we do this every year. We have for a couple of years now. All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
That's about the only motion I can do that well off the cuff, just saying.
It's much
Purple
better
lights,
than
blue
mine.
lights, green
Add
lights,
another
whatever the
letter.
color is.
Add another word.
11.4, Forest Enhancement Society of BC. That was an interesting read, I have to say. And 11.5, consultation on 2024 marine finfish license reissuance and conditions. And the deadline for consultation is March 8th. And I had no idea that existing marine finfish aquaculture licenses in British Columbia, issued by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, expire on June 30th, 2024. That was a surprise, but there you go. That's why they're doing consultation. If anyone is interested. And Alberni, 11.6 Alberni Clayoquot Regional District launches Fire Smart Home Partnership Program. And I think that's, it doesn't really apply for us. It's, it would be Area C, Long Beach. And now we are at Council Committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
Oh. So I'll talk about the LGLA. That was the big one. So that was great. We there was the 3 of us got to drive together, which was fun, and yeah, it was actually a pretty insightful conference. I think when it got into the nitty gritty of the elephant in the room was obviously like legislation and all that stuff, and I found the BC assessment part it wasn't as clear as I was hoping, as I'd said before, but there was a lawyer, and I can't, his name was, I'm trying to remember, Bill Bullhoser from Young Anderson, maybe, and I can't remember, like, he started talking about what we briefly were just discussing, the idea of things are changing with development cost charges and with pre-zoning up to like 20 years of an OCP with this zoning that'll be in place that'll make it difficult to negotiate with developers. And that's what I think I was thinking is, well, how do you get money for infrastructure if we can't do that? And as Bruce was just mentioning to me, like there's changes that are happening with that, and we don't totally know what that's going to look like, but like ACCs or amenity cost charges would be something that would follow, and they have a more broad definition, so potentially a better situation than we were in before. There was one little nugget in there that, and I'm not going to go on and on about this, but there was just this one little thing that he said that just kind of stuck in my head, and it was about land use management. Then he talked about some ALR stuff that was more tailored to some of the regional, but the land use management, there was a question, and he was saying that at one point there was a growth strategy that was delivered from the BC government, and he said that it promoted growth in BC, but then there were certain areas in coastal regions that didn't want that growth to be applied to their small villages because they thought it would ruin their farming character type of thing. So they got together with the Island Trust. This happened in the Southern Gulf Islands, and the purpose was to preserve their town and their environment, to not adopt the growth strategy that was blanketed there. And I'm just, I don't know, I thought that was kind of neat that you know, like, even though that this was sort of pushed down, they were able to, through the Island Trust, they were able to find a way to kind of not have to overdevelop in a certain area that they were using as their tourist attraction to keep the character of their town. I'm not saying anything with that. I'm just saying that was kind of a neat little nugget that went in there, and I thought I was hoping to follow up with him, and I went to chase him down after, but he took off really quick. I think he was trying to get away from me. So anyway, that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoare.
I believe they formed the Island Trust as a way to kind of put a little bit of a break on some of that legislation stuff and that forced growth. Also was attending the LGLA. Did not drive with you guys. Felt dissed on the ride home, just saying, because I had to do it all solo. Well, I don't know. There was some really interesting workshops. There always are. Always interesting when the ACRD Chair John Jack hosts one of the Indigenous realities sort of workshops. Lots of housing stuff, but one of the ones that I was fascinated by was a presentation by the Natural Asset Initiative. And they actually will help you with natural asset assessments. And there's actually like more and more stuff coming down about how to look at the natural assets within our boundaries and how to actually assess them, because natural assets have, God, I like went and wrote this really neat little comment down, and now can I find it? Natural assets have both kind of infrastructure, but also non-infrastructure services. Like wetlands can be protective in the case of potential tsunamis and things, but so they actually perform almost like a piece of infrastructure. But then also they're a wonderful place to go for a walk and enjoy the wildlife and stuff. So I really want to encourage, I know staff is acting like ducks in the water and they're paddling like a million miles a minute. But so I'm just going to say that I'm really interested in the whole notion of natural asset management, because we are surrounded by amazing natural assets. And I think it would be really interesting to kind of talk to the initiative and maybe see what they can do to help us look at the wonderful things that we have here. Because if you want to have like resilient infrastructure of any sort, you kind of need to look at some nature-based solutions. I really think that the only way we get to the emissions targets in the future are by looking at some of the natural solutions around us. So with that in mind, on the LGLA, my quote from LGLA is that life is what you pay attention to. So I am trying to pay attention to the natural world. So that's my little green hat. Last week on the 8th, we had the grant and aid presentations at a committee of the whole. That's always one of my favorite ones. Everybody comes in and asks for money, but we don't tell them anything. We just get to listen to all their stories and all their projects, and that's always exciting. On the 11th, this past Saturday, I attended the AGM for the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board. Always interesting stats. They said 38% of their interactions are now up to, or are virtual, which is, you know, quite a good proportion. Obviously, it got bumped up by COVID. And they said in the service area, it's a massive service area. I can't even tell you how many First Nations are part of it and how many municipalities. But only 37% of the population within that service area holds a library card. And I think a lot of people don't realize all of the things that the library has that you might actually be paying somebody else for. So if you're trying to watch your pennies, and we know we all are, so I got a little handout for my fellow members of council, which is on the e-resources and that the library has. And it's things like Ancestry, like they have access to the Ancestry information. There is on their site, Canopy is streaming video. One of the most popular things that is streamed is a lot of the BBC stuff. So you can pay somebody for your streaming services, or you can get a library card. Just saying. Music, they have 17 million songs, and you're actually allowed to download 4 songs per day. So you could actually build your own library of songs. I mean, yes, it might take you a little while to get, but there's 17 million. So I'm pretty sure everybody's got a genre in there that they might enjoy. So plug for the library, and audiobooks, which can be direct to Kobos if you happen to have a Kobo. Unlimited use, like it's an amazing resource. So, and it is legislated to be free. So use this resource, people. I know that our little library isn't open all that often, but the electronic resources are there 24/7. So, yeah. I'm just that's my high horse. And then this morning, I attended the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Council discussion of enhanced monitoring program that they're putting forward for the salmon bycatch in the hake fishery. And they're making a couple of big changes. And so there was a lot of very heated discussion this morning. They've put a cap on the number of salmon that the entire trawl fleet can catch, a number cap. Yeah. So like I don't know, probably nobody but me knows how the quota system works. Yeah, so it's that's going to change the way people have to fish, and they are going to have to actually try to avoid catching salmon, because once that number's hit, nobody is allowed to trawl for midwater trawl. They will all be bottom trawling only. And currently the midwater trawl for hake is actually the least damaging. I mean, we won't talk about the fish, but the least damaging to the seabed and seafloor. Anyway, so some big changes afoot, and the new season starts on the 21st of this month. So they have been scrambling, much like the ducks with the paddling legs, to try and get something in place before the season starts. So I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Keep us posted.
Yeah, and that was me up until like 12:15 today. So
great, thank you. Councillor Kennington?
Hey, I was also at LGLA.
I saw you there.
And I have nothing really to add to what you've already said, although the one thing that became clear to me, the pre-zone for 20 years, and this was at the Housing Legislation Workshop, Bill 44, 46, and 47, pre-zone for 20 years, and as that relates to Ucluelet with the limited amount of land we have, and we look at the 20-year projection, we really need to sort of distribute that density properly over what remaining lands we have. And that's going to be a really interesting exercise, because as we go forward with different developments and the different kinds of pressures that we have and resistance to those developments, we're going to have to look at it through that 20-year lens, which is going to really change the conversation from today to 20 years from now. And the explanation was good about the DCCs and the ACCs being sort of that. It's almost like a checklist where it's no longer negotiated, which is kind of interesting. So when a developer comes, they know beforehand what they have to contribute. And I think that's really going to help streamline the process, because it takes the negotiations out of it. We know what we're going to get, they know what they're going to pay, and we can just move on. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Learned how to cook duck on a table at the restaurant. That was interesting. 4 people wrestling for 8-inch round little flame. That was pretty fun. That's it.
It was interesting. Great, thank you. Councillor Mafti had to leave. I've been to a lot of meetings since our last council meeting. January 24th, I attended in person the ACRD Committee of the Whole meeting in Port Alberni. It was the start of their budget process. And it was an interesting process. I've never seen this done before. It's new to them as well. They had 19 proposed initiative cases. So they call them PICs, proposed initiative cases. And they define a PIC as a change in level of service or challenge in maintaining current levels of service. For example, increased bylaw enforcement approach. Number 2, a project that is not required by legislation. For example, the Bamfield Development Plan. Number 3, new assets not included in asset management plans. For example, the Long Beach Airport, new larger terminal building. And 4, a feasibility study. For example, the Alberni Valley Aquatics Facility. So those are sort of examples of what PICs are. They had 19 of them on the agenda, and we're a board of 14 people. You can imagine how long that meeting took to debate all those issues. But we managed to get through it and tabled some, but approved others, and so it got done. And then in the afternoon was the regular ACRD Board of Directors meeting. Mark Fortune received his 10-year service recognition gift, which was really nice to see him there. The West Coast Landfill compost cover building contract was awarded. And there was an AVICC resolution to request the Ministry of Transportation to work with communities with only one access road in and out, the ability to assess forestry roads. So that's a resolution that they're forwarding to AVICC in April. January 25th, I was at the Minado Bay Open House here at the Community Centre. Quite a different vibe in the room than there was at the High Focus Open House. January 26th, I attended an Island Health update. It was mostly statistics. And I have a few here. In 2023, there were 2,511 deaths in BC due to toxic overdoses. And Nanaimo and Port Alberni were the worst on Vancouver Island. In 2023, Island Health hired 4,500 people, and they lost 2,500 people. So they still ended up ahead. And the hospital situation, Nanaimo was at 105%, and Tofino was at 97% occupancy. Just interesting stats. LGLA was from January 30th to February 2nd. There was a session on the flurry of provincial housing bills last fall, which gave a little bit of clarity. A great presentation on the August wildfire in West Kelowna and how that was handled. The Natural Asset Infrastructure Program, and there was an interesting legal workshop on climate damage and risks that and risks and local government liability in those situations. February 7th was the ACRD Committee of the Whole meeting for their grant and aid requests. They had 43 requests. They don't allow groups to participate. It's just in a written format. So that also, with a board of 14, took a very long time to go through. February 8th was our Committee of the Whole meeting with our grants in aid. We had 18 requests, but eight of those were in kind. I thought that was larger than normal. Normally it's mainly money, but 8 of those 18 were just looking for like room donations and things like that. And 13 people attended in person or on Zoom of those 18 groups. February 9th, Transportation Committee meeting. It was held at the ACRD, but some of us attended by Zoom. And the ACRD is committing $70,000 towards putting it towards a consulting firm to analyze the studies that have already been done rather than doing yet another study, because looking for a second access to the coast has been done, that studies many times. So anyway, they're putting $70,000 toward trying to finally figure out what the best route is. And the Ministry of Transportation is doing engineering studies on all the studies that have been done before and those routes. And then February 14th was the ACRD Committee of the Whole meeting in the morning, which I went to in person. That's each department presented their budget. Their total budget is $29.4 million, which is up 9.8% over last year, but 5 of that is due to the West Coast Transit program that's going to start up here in April. And in the afternoon yesterday was the ACRT board meeting, and the Vancouver Island Regional Library did their presentation, and their budget is $38 million, which is up 15% from last year. And that's it for my meetings. Question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within Council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. There is no audience, so there are no questions. Mr. Rotenberg, are there any questions by Zoom?
Please click the raise your hand icon if you'd like to ask a question. No hands are raised at this time.
Anyone on telephone?
*9 to raise your hand. No hands are raised at this time.
And any emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca.
Updating the folder. No new emails.
All right. I will move that the February 15th, 2024 regular council meeting be closed to the public pursuant to the following sections of the community charter. 90(1) labor relations or other employee relations. 90(1) litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. And 90(1) the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And that is at 6:56.
Second.
Councillor Kennington seconds. All in favor? None opposed. That carries.